What's up, everyone? Good morning and welcome back to Shaw Locals Bears Insider Podcast. I am Kyle Nabors along with Sean Hammond. Good to be back with you here on Tuesday morning. It's February 21st. If you're listening to this in the podcast and wondering what the hell I'm talking about, good morning. But for it being late February, Sean, it's pretty nice outside. I'm excited to talk football. You know, I, we're going to talk a lot today about three main topics: Justin Fields and the offseason chatter that is really starting to ramp up now that the Super Bowl is over. Arlington Park, the Bears finishing off that sale and closing on the property, and then we'll finish up today talking a little bit of combine. That is really sneaking up on us, man.
Yeah, I'm leaving in 6 days for the combine. I don't know where February went, but it's flying by.
Yeah, it's the NFL offseason. Who was it? Someone was asking me a little bit ago, a friend that doesn't really understand like how our job functions, particularly your job. My job's a little different as an editor. You as a beat writer is a little different. Like he was like, "Well, what do you do like when the NFL season's over?" I'm like, "I don't think you understand." Like I walk him through. I'm like, "So like the Super Bowl ends, the combine is 2 weeks later, then you go into draft prep." Or I'm sorry, like then you go into free agency, then you go into draft prep, then you have the draft. 2 weeks later, you have rookie mini camp, then you have OTAs, then you get that like a 3 or 4 week gap where you do actually get to take some time off, and then
Yeah.
bam, it's late July and the season is here.
Yeah, you know what? That's like the number one question I get all the time is, well, especially this time of year. Well, what are you doing exactly right now? I'm like, there's plenty to write about. It does not dry up all that much. Sure, maybe it's a little quiet in early February, but it's not so bad. I mean, we got plenty of things to talk about, plenty of things to write about all year round here on the NFL beat.
Yeah, I mean, that's really what we're going to start with here today. Is there's never a shortage of topics, and some of it is created by stuff we come up talking here on the podcast, and some of it is really driven by outside forces. And that's kind of where we want to start today with the Justin Fields chatter, because you knew it was coming. It had already started even when the Bears season ended. But as the NFL season winds down, you get past the Super Bowl, the 24-hour cable networks have to fill all those slots. You got a lot of talking heads. And I'm going to borrow or steal a phrase from Dan Bernstein and Terry Boers. They always like to talk about out of town stupid on the show, or Chicago meatball. And it's I'm trying to figure out how we're balancing those things, because like what are legit critiques of Justin Fields and legit ideas or trade ideas, and what are just people filling time.
Yeah, no, I mean, you get enough talking heads, you're going to find a few of them who think that trading Justin Fields is the right move this offseason. And sure, everyone's entitled to their own opinion, but that stories about that and discussion about that really ramped up here in the last week. And personally, I mean, I think there's a very, very small chance that that's something that actually happens. I don't think the Bears are looking to trade Justin Fields right now.
Like, if I've seen so many ridiculous trade scenarios too over the past week, and
Oops.
if there was like was it like maybe Indianapolis, or maybe it was like Houston, it was like 3 first-round picks and 2 second-round picks, and like just silliness like that. Of course, like if that happens, I'd probably be like, yeah, you should trade Justin Fields. But that isn't going to happen. Like, there's trade charts. There's like,
Yeah.
and I just, I don't know. I agree with you. I don't see any way they trade him. Uh, I, but the way people go about it too, like the way they frame their evaluation of trades, I don't have any problem talking about if that should be a legit option or not. It's the fact that like they frame it sometimes as like Justin Fields is a finished product, or like they
Yeah.
know what Justin Fields is going to be, and that's what really starts to drive me a bit insane.
Yeah, you can talk about it. I mean, I think Ryan Poles isn't doing his due diligence if he doesn't, explore every single option to make the football team better. But I don't know that there's an option in the draft as far as quarterbacks who is absolutely going to be better than Justin Fields. You're talking about a quarterback who's got 2 years of NFL experience. He's learned what he can and can't do. You saw the way that he adjusted his game last season and used his legs more because he needed to. You come in with a rookie. Uh, One, it's a 50-50 chance whether the guy's going to be good or not, and then two, even if he is good, it's a learning curve. Look how long it's taken Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields to sort of get comfortable in the NFL game. You're winding that clock back all the way to zero if you trade Justin Fields and draft another quarterback, and that sets the whole timeline back another year or two, whatever it's going to take. And I just don't think that they're at that point right now. I think they're pretty happy with the progress they saw in Justin Fields and think they can build off of it.
Torian Whitfield checking in with us this morning says Mike Tannenbaum has trade Justin fever. I have not seen what you're referring to, Torian. If someone had seen that, it sounds like the way the chat is talking right now. Great to see everyone this morning, by the way. If drop whatever that trade scenario that Micah was discussing in there, I'm interested to know. But yeah, quickly as I bring that up, great to see everyone this morning. We welcome having everyone in. It's awesome. It helps guide the show. So we are here pretty much whenever we can, actually, during the off season. We try and make our schedules work, but it gets
a little
weird.
Chaotic right now.
Schedule gets a little chaotic. But make sure you subscribe to Shaw Local's YouTube page. If you're watching on YouTube right now, just hit the subscribe, hit the like button, hit the notification button. It helps people find the show. It helps grow the channel. It helps us figure out what you guys want to talk about. And, it really helps us give a reason to jump on here and want to talk football with you guys. So we appreciate everyone who is here this morning talking with us. Let's see. And then Sebastian C here checking in says Bears are putting up a smokescreen pretending to trade Fields to gain more trade value for the number 1 pick. I've seen this bandied about a lot. And I wouldn't say it's a smokescreen. They're just not saying anything because they don't need to say anything. Like there's no reason to have to reaffirm their commitment to Justin Fields. It's better to let this to the chatter occur, right?
Yeah, let the folks at ESPN and NFL Network and wherever come out with their takes, and they don't have to put anything out there because there's going to be people on all sides of this and opinions on all sides, and obviously that's driving the conversation right now because we're talking about it. So I don't necessarily think that they need to do anything. And Ryan Poles has generally been pretty quiet when it comes to this stuff.
He has. I'm interested. Obviously, the questions are coming at the combine, right?
Yeah.
The at the postseason or the postseason press conference, they did a pretty good job, I felt, of conveying their plan and their feelings on Justin Fields. But that was at a Chicago setting. We're going to be at the NFL Combine where you're going to be getting questioned from a lot of people just throwing stuff against the wall to see what answers they get. And the Bears certainly know this, and they're going to have a strategy for that, right? Mr. Shorty popping in here. It would be stupid not to make it look like they want to trade him. Yeah. And so like that, there is a line to walk. And with the questions they're going to get at the combine, it's going to be our first look at a national stage, how the Bears plan to sell this message to the league.
Yeah. Ryan Poles didn't say a whole lot at the end of the season about that other than, we got a chance to make our football team better with this number 1 pick because he didn't really have to. But, obviously at the combine, the focus is all on the future, and this is all going to be focused on the draft and what's coming up in free agency. And we all know, the folks who listen to us regularly know that, you get a lot of jargon and stuff out of these guys during these interviews, especially before the draft. But still, I think it's going to be useful to sort of hear how he spins this because this is such a momentous draft for him and his organization, and I think we'll sort of get some clues as to what they're thinking here next week when Ryan Poles does talk at the combine.
Trying to pull up another comment here. So Sebastian had followed it up, and this is similar to some of the talk I've seen about. I do think Indianapolis is a very, very legit trade partner for that number 1 overall pick. I would not be surprised at all to see Indianapolis pull the trigger on a trade here. With that being said, Sebastian says, we'll trade with Indy. They'll give us their first and second, future first and future second at a minimum. And I know Indy is desperate. I'm blanking out at the top on the top of my head the owner's name.
Irsay.
Irsay, thank you. Germ Irsay. Germ Irsay is a bit of an oddball. He certainly seems like the type that would overpay. I think that's too rich. I don't think the Bears are getting a first and a second, and then a first and a second next year.
No, they're probably only getting either a 1 or a 2 next year. I don't think they would get 4 picks out of that. That's just my guess, though. I will say that, I think Ryan Poles should, leading up to this draft here, he should get on the direct line with Jim Irsay. Don't even talk to Ballard. Irsay's throwing all this stuff out there about, he's talking the talk, saying we got to get a young quarterback, and it seems like he's telegraphing what they want to do. As we all know, these guys tend to lie this time of year. So who actually knows what's going on there? But Jim Irsay says what's on his mind, and so you know what? If he's that desperate for a young quarterback, call him up, tell him what you need, what it's going to take, and just leave Chris Ballard out of it. Whatever, go straight to the owner.
It's funny because there are some people that like they put stuff out there just to put stuff out there. But like Jim Irsay is the type of guy, like we have a large enough sample size with ridiculous trades, particularly the last couple of years at the quarterback position. Like, that he's willing to do something dumb. I don't think it's willing to go as far as what Mr. Sebastian or Sebastian C was saying. Not Mr. We'll call you Mr. Sebastian.
Mr.
Combining
Sebastian.
Mr. Shorty, Mr. Sebastian. But I'm looking here.
Hey, he hired a TV analyst to be his head coach. I think he would trade a heck of a lot of picks to get that number 1 spot.
I'm sorry, who said that?
Irsay. I'm saying Irsay hired a TV analyst to be his head coach last year. So who knows what he'll give up to get the number 1 pick?
Yeah, I was having a conversation with a couple of friends, and we were trying to go through like most dysfunctional teams in the NFL right now. The Colts have to be near the top of the list, and it's weird because it was such a quality franchise from pretty much like
it's really
Peyton Manning. Yeah. It's just it's pretty ridiculous.
That's what happens when you can't figure out the quarterback.
Let's see, Mr. Shorty chiming in. I know Mr. Shorty's been looking at the draft chart. I'm seeing it here. It said they would take like the 8th pick to get a first next year. This is where it'll be nice to have Hubba on a little more soon, because he certainly knows the draft chart better than I think either of us do, and we'll have a pretty good idea from his sources exactly where teams are at in terms of their evaluation of these other quarterbacks, because I don't want to scroll back through all the comments here. I'll lose my place and lose my train of thought. But I saw earlier someone mentioned that there are concerns about these quarterbacks in this draft class. They all, that being said, there's always concerns about quarterbacks when you're talking about the NFL, and teams still draft them. I mean, the Bears drafted Mitchell Trubisky, number 2 overall, and a kid that was obviously had high talent, but there were a lot of questions around him, and it obviously didn't work. Teams will convince themselves, right? Will they convince themselves enough to pay a ridiculous amount for that number 1 overall pick? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you're certainly hoping that teams convince themselves this year, because ultimately that's, you can drum up whatever Justin Fields rumors you want. Ultimately, it comes down to whether these teams are going to want that quarterback, whether that's Bryce Young or CJ Stroud, whoever. Are they going to want to jump Houston and get up to that number 1 spot to get their quarterback? That's the big question. And I think we'll probably get a better sense of that after the combine here. But in a lot of ways, it's kind of out of the Bears' control whether that's actually going to be the case.
Yeah, that's what I think. The focus on Justin Fields and his potential trade value is missing the point, because that's such a low probability. The bigger question is the one that we just raised here and that we're now discussing. It's, are teams going to convince themselves that Bryce Young and these other quarterbacks are legit enough to overpay for the number one pick. And listen, there's going to be at least one team. I'd be absolutely shocked if the
I
Bears.
feel like there's going to be one team at least.
Yeah, but the you want more than one team, right? So
Yeah.
what we need to find out is how many of these teams are legit going to convince themselves that it's worth trading up with the Bears, or are they going to say, you know what, if we don't get that top guy, we feel comfortable at number 3 or number 4. Let's trade up there, you know.
What
And
do you, Kyle? What do you make of the Raiders now with Derek Carr hitting the streets? Are they looking for a veteran, or are they looking for a rookie?
I don't know what to do with that franchise either, because like they're kind of at a crossroads,
They
right?
are.
Like
Yeah.
you just made that trade for Devontae Adams, and you gave him the extension. Yeah, you've made this change from Derek Carr. Josh Jacobs is headed to free agency. I don't know what their plans are.
It felt very slapstick. Slapstick might not be the right words. They really slapped that team together last year. They it felt like new coach. Let's get a star player. Hey, Devontae Adams available. And now they're kind of standing around wondering, what to do next. And I can't really figure that out either, because it's going to be hard to convince a veteran free agent to come play for your team when you won 6 games last year, and clearly they have some issues to work out. Now, obviously, you could trade for somebody, and they wouldn't have necessarily control over where they land, but the good quarterbacks do. But yeah, I mean, that would be a big move from, what are they, ninth in the draft order? I'm forgetting exactly where they are, somewhere around that range, 8, 9, 10.
I don't have it right in front of me.
That would be a big jump if they're looking to trade up to potentially 1 or somewhere in that range.
Mr. Shorty checking in here with, I would still swap pick with the Colts and a first next year, then trade the 4th down to 8 or so. So this is a realistic scenario, and particularly with trading down to 4. So then you talk about trading down again, Mr. Shorty. And my question there is, I don't know how far the Bears are willing to trade back. If you're looking here, it's Mark Potash, fantastic Bears beat writer with the Chicago Sun-Times. Make sure you are giving Mark's content a read. Mark checking in this morning said, would it be worth it for the Bears to trade down past 4 and not get Jalen Carter or Will Anderson? He took the words right out of my mouth that I was going to ask Mr. Shorty. Yeah, if you you trade down past 4, there's pretty much a virtual guarantee you are missing out on both of those guys. I'm not even sure. I think one of them are going to be there at 4. I don't think both of them are going to be there at 4, Sean.
Well, especially if the Bears are trading back, it's most likely for a quarterback, whoever takes that number 1 spot. Then you still got Houston sitting there at 2. I would think that 2 quarterbacks are going to go in that scenario. And yeah, that leaves you in a good chance. That leaves you with an opportunity to get whoever's left of those 2. And I do think that, like, the Bears have to address that defensive line, and you got 2 really, really talented young rookies who look like they're going to be big difference makers on the defensive line. I think the Bears would be happy with either of them, and so an ideal scenario is not moving down past 4. Just for that reason, I think you got a chance to get a guy who could be a real difference maker for your team, and those guys don't come around very often, and it gets harder once you're trading down to 8 to 9 to 10. It's even more of a crapshoot.
I wanted to save combine stuff to the last, but you know what, we're gonna flip it around. We'll finish with Arlington Park today, Sean, because we're starting to get
Sure.
into combine talk naturally here. And I do want to give a plug at this point. Make sure you go to shawlocal.com. We have plenty of preview content going up. What we're really doing is we're trying to focus, or I shouldn't say Sean has been focusing on the positions that the Bears are going to be most interested in at the combine, breaking those down, giving you guys some of these top prospects to watch, not just the top prospects, but guys that could be those 2nd or 3rd round guys, day 2 picks that, could be guys that end up, maybe based on their combine result, could be a 3rd round pick or could sneak into the back end of the 1st round. It's really open to interpretation. It's going to be a fun week down there. Make sure you go to shawlocal.com. And the other thing that we've been working on, we got 3 pieces up right now, and this is going to frame a lot of the Bears offseason. when you look at the contract extensions or potential contract extensions, one for David Montgomery, who's entering free agency. Bears could franchise tag him or they could extend him. You're looking at Jalen Johnson going into the last year of a rookie deal. And who's the third guy that I'm forgetting? Cole Kmet. Cole Kmet. There it is. Cole Kmet. Got all three of those pieces up. Sean not only looks at their production, but he compares it over the last several years to other people at their positions that have gotten extensions, break it down looking at their production, and kind of setting the table of how much it would cost to re-sign these guys. They're really interested pieces. I really would recommend going over to shawlocal.com. Sean, if you don't mind, if you could, while I'm setting up the combine talk here, drop a link over in the chat there for people. For let's start with David Montgomery. We'll start with David Montgomery, the newest one there, and let them find a way.
I'll probably have a Darnell Mooney version of this coming out here this week too.
Yeah, that's another guy that definitely going to be some questions whether or how much money Darnell Mooney is going to get, and if that's coming from the Bears. I think it will be from the Bears. But anyway, so we're going to be talking about free agency down the road a little bit more. Let's talk about combine here and some of these guys that we're interested in. Gary Ross. Gary, good to have you on this morning, man. Checking in. He had said Will Anderson is a 3-4 outside linebacker. He is not a hand in dirt defensive end. So I'll say this, like I'm still personally learning a lot about these guys in terms of where they're going to fall in the draft. Will Anderson is a guy that I've done a fair bit of research on. I don't have any real doubts that he cannot be a 4-3 defensive end, Sean.
Yeah, I mean, you can shape this guy into whatever you want. I mean, he's the best pass rusher in this draft. I mean, we didn't necessarily think Micah Parsons was going to be the pass rusher that he is. Sometimes these guys, even though they might do certain things with their college teams, there's potential there. If you want to stick him in this defensive scheme, I don't have any problem with that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any problem with it at all. I think he's going to be able to do it. I really don't have any issues at all with him in a 4-3 scheme. I don't think with that being said, Gary followed up, would rather have Carter, Murphy, or Wilson. I'll say this. If I had to pick between Will Anderson and Jalen Carter, let's say the Bears did trade down to 4 and somehow they were both there, or they decided to pick one of them at number 1 or something like that, I'd rather have Jalen Carter than Will Anderson. How about you, Sean?
I keep going back and forth on this. Maybe ask me in a couple of weeks. But certainly I see the argument for both guys. I think that defensive tackle spot we know how important that is for the Bears. And, they put an emphasis on trying to fill that hole last year with Larry Ogunjobi, and it didn't work out. I do wonder if they're going to wind up signing one of those big defensive tackles in free agency, in which case maybe they think more about getting a defensive end in the draft, but that's a lot of this has to happen before that sort of thing. So it's hard to say, but I would be fine with either of those guys.
That's a good point. We talked about that on the last podcast, I believe, that this could all change if we get to free agency and the Bears could spend big at the defensive tackle position. So,
you can't do both. I mean, you can address the position in two ways. You're basically starting over on the defensive line at all 4 of those spots. So there's going to be room for multiple guys.
Just really quickly, Timothy Wire checking and saying Brad Spielberger over at Pro Football Focus says a contract offer of 3 years, 19.5 for Monty. I feel like that's a bit low, Sean.
I feel like that's low. I do.
It's hard to figure out with David Montgomery what he's going to be able to get, because as you point out in that piece you that you just dropped into the chat, there are a ton of free agent running backs going to the market.
Yeah.
And I wonder if someone like David Montgomery is going to have to settle for less than he honestly deserves because of the glut at running back.
There's kind of 2 scenarios I could see playing out. There's so many good free agent running backs, and nobody when I was going back through this, nobody from the 2019 draft class has signed an extension as far as running backs. That's pretty wild. That's David Montgomery's included in that. And that's why there's so many good free agents this cycle at the running back spot. And so maybe that leads to a guy like David Montgomery coming a little bit cheaper because other teams have filled that spot and there's less demand. It could also be, the guys who miss out on the teams that miss out on Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs. What if they're desperate? What if Saquon re-signs with the Giants, and then some team who was willing to spend a big chunk of money on a running back is sitting there and says, well, we still need a running back. Maybe that could play into David Montgomery's favor. I could see that kind of going either way.
I get that. I don't know how teams are going to approach running backs. That seems like it seems like a low probability likelihood what you're describing there. Just because like if that was the case, I feel like some of these guys would have already been re-signed because there would have been enough teams worried about that scenario. You know what I mean?
I would think so too. I mean, I think it's, part of it is the 2019 running back class wasn't amazing. There's some good guys in there, but nothing crazy. And part of it is this changing outlook on the running back spot. I mean, the Chiefs have been to 5 straight AFC Championship games, and they haven't they haven't given a multi-year deal to a running back in since 2016 or before that. You don't necessarily need that stud, high-paid running back to be successful in the NFL anymore.
We were supposed to be talking combine, and we've found our way over
we're talking free agency.
We're talking free agent.
Let me say one more thing, though.
No. Actually, you're good. Go ahead and finish it. But I have something to follow it up to. We're not going back to the combine.
I went into writing that David Montgomery thing thinking that his value has probably took a hit after last season. But when you look at, when you average out his production over the 4 years of his career, it really didn't take that much of a hit. I still think he's going to cost between $10 to $12 million a year. So I think it's going to be more than that 3-year, $19 million number that somebody threw up there.
I've seen some people in the chat drop that the Bears should pursue Saquon Barkley. I've seen some people say don't pay any running back, even Saquon. There is a wide range here, and I tend to fall in the camp of don't pay running backs. There was one name when I was reading your story that was really intriguing me. And anyone who's been a regular on this podcast probably knows what name popped up to me. Sean, do you care to guess what name stood out to me and made me interested?
I'm sorry, from the free agents?
Free agent.
Oh, I know who you're going. You're going Tony Pollard.
Yep, there's my guy. I love Tony Pollard. I love with the way the NFL is set up now. I love dual threat running backs. I love guys that can do things in space that you can put out into the slot. The question I have with that, right? Like, let's just say the Bears did that. Khalil Herbert does not have a great resume as a blocker. That's part of the reason why the Bears love David Montgomery so much. I don't know enough about Tony Pollard's blocking skills to know if that would be a fit. But my question is, if you don't re-sign David Montgomery, right? You go with Khalil Herbert. Is that a concern? Like the blocking concern. When you bring in a rookie running back too, let's say they draft a running back in that 3rd round or something like that, which would make a lot of sense. Is that someone you're able to trust? Do you want to trust a rookie to be blocking back there for Justin Fields, right? So
yeah, those are all fair concerns.
That is something where I think it's really easy to look at the explosiveness of players and want to go for the big name guy. But Ryan Poles and them do seem like that is a big part of the way they want to run this offense. They are going to be concerned about that. So it's going to impact the way they approach running back, I think.
And look at, I mentioned the Chiefs earlier. They had a 7th round draft pick looking like a madman in the Super Bowl at the running back spot, and Isaiah Pacheco. And look at the Eagles too. They haven't extended Miles Sanders. That's where Ryan Poles and Ian Cunningham are coming from. That's where they've sort of built their philosophies. And so I think that maybe, should give you some inkling that maybe they are going to be okay with letting David Montgomery walk away.
Yeah. I mean, unless the market does bear out the way Brad Spielberger is saying, ahead of free agency, most guys or most agents have a decent idea of what they're going to be able to get their player by the time free agency is a couple days away, right? So it could get to the point where we get close to free agency and David Montgomery's representation, come back to him and say, listen, we might not be able to get what we were hoping for on the open market. We need to go back to the Bears and see if we can extract a little bit more now before it becomes painfully obvious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of the running back position is going to be one of the most interesting to watch in this free agency cycle because some guys there's probably gonna be some guys who get paid more than we're thinking, and there's probably gonna be some guys who don't.
Yeah, it's funny because running back it's becoming less of a priority in the NFL, but really this offseason is going to be dictated a lot by what happens at that running back position, I feel like.
Yeah, and we're gonna get a true sense of how much these teams value that position.
Yeah, that's true. With all these guys out there, I do think we're gonna have a better feel for where this is going. I think we're already seeing the trend with the way that these guys are getting to free agency. I do think we're gonna see depressed values, but it's for NFL free agency. Teams can do stupid things. Jim Irsay once again.
Some teams like the Bears have a lot of money to spend.
Yeah. But anyway, so let's get back over. Someone earlier had talked, I believe it was Gary. Let's see if I can find Gary's comment up here. Yeah, Gary said, why can't the Bears sign Payne and draft Carter, get the best interior defensive line in the league? I don't think that's a lot of resources to commit to one position. I also don't think it's a terrible idea, though, Gary.
There's no reason you can't. But yeah, I mean, you're kind of putting like you said, Kyle, you said it perfectly. Those are two valuable resources in your cap space and your number one draft pick or number 4, whatever it winds up being, at the defensive tackle spot. But yeah, that's a huge need for the Bears. I don't have any problem with them addressing it in as many ways as possible. You can still find a decent pass rusher, early in the second round if you pick up a second round pick with a trade. I have no problem with that.
I think back to the Tommy Harris era, going kind of feeling like the Wayback Machine now. But you look back at the way the Bears built that team that ended up going to the Super Bowl and that defensive line. It was a great defense, right? But when we talk about building great interior defensive lines, the Bears hit it out of the park with the draft of Tommy Harris. I do feel like it's a similar scenario when you look at a guy like Jalen Carter. But expanding outside of that, I look back at that Bears defensive line, and you draft Tommy Harris. You had Alex Brown at one in position. I want to say it was Albert Algun? Or no, not who was the defensive end from, I think they made a trade with Miami. Ended up being a really good player. I'm blanking on the name. It was always hard to say the last name, and it's certainly hard to say now 15 years removed without. And then I believe it was Tank Johnson was their other guy on the interior there.
Yeah.
I don't know, when I think about that, like when you have a dominant interior defensive lineman and quality guys on the end, I don't know if it's worth paying 2 top tier guys. Like if you're drafting someone like Jalen Carter, I don't know if it's worth also then going for a guy like Payne. I think you can have a more mid-tier guy next to Carter as long as you also kind of work up those defensive end positions.
Yeah, I mean, the fact is they're going to have to address those positions, both defensive end and defensive tackle, in multiple ways. I wouldn't be surprised if they signed and drafted guys at each spot. But yeah, is that going to be your first round pick and your highest paid free agent? Probably not. Maybe not. I don't know. It could be. But yeah, I mean, you can take a chance on somebody in the 3rd round and have a little bit less value at stake in a situation like that.
Posse checking in with Adewale Ogunleye. For some reason, the only name I had the initials A and O, and my mind, because I think this past year I was trying to teach myself how to say the Broncos tight end Albert I'm not even going to try and do it on this podcast. Just say I'm Albert O. And I think having done that this past year, now that's all I could think about when I was trying to come up with Adewale Ogunleye. When I keep saying Albert.
That that name was sort of like on the tip of my tongue, in the back of my head, and I couldn't think of it either, Kyle.
But I think that's a good comparison. Like when we're talking about how to build this Bears line, if you're confident enough in Jalen Carter, I don't think you need to sign a Payne. Now that I think about it a little bit more, I do think they need to sign another defensive tackle, but I don't think it needs to be a top tier guy. If that being said, you don't know Jalen Carter is going to be available when you draft, particularly if you're trading down. Do you want to take that risk? I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out, obviously, but I think it's one or the other.
Yeah, it's most likely you're not going to use both assets, all that money and the top draft pick on the same position. Certainly you could, but I don't think that they're going to do that.
Rick Gonzalez said, "You also thought we were keeping 55, Kyle." Hey, I didn't say that I think they were or thought they were going to do it. I said I thought they should do it, and they obviously thought differently.
I saw that news come across the Twitter feed, and I thought of all you guys on the show. So thanks for that conversation a couple of weeks ago. No, you guys were right.
Yeah, well, we'll see. And I believe while we've been talking, I saw it pop in the chat that the Bears cut Blackson. Rick's checking in with "that's even worse." LOL. That I'm still trying to. It is what it is, man. Like I didn't think that the Bears needed to cut him. Now maybe there's something behind the scenes that it's just not his on-field performance. That could also be a part of the case here. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes, that type of stuff. But money-wise, it didn't seem to really be a reason. But whatever. That's it's in the past. Let's move on. Sean, where do you want to go? You're the guy that's going to be down there in Indianapolis pretty soon. What are you really focusing on or thinking about going down to Indy?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a lot of thought and concern about, not concern, but discussion about that number one pick for the Bears. But I'm also, curious to see some of these other positions. We were talking about running backs. There's a lot of good running backs available in the second and the third round. And certainly the Bears are going to need guys. And when you look at the pass rushers who are going to be available on day two, there's options here for the Bears to get better. And that's, that goes well beyond that number one pick. Obviously, that's a huge part of this whole conversation and discussion. But if they do let David Montgomery walk away, there's a bunch of really talented running backs who could potentially fill that void for the Bears. I had a piece up last week about running backs to keep an eye on. Maybe I can find it here and throw it in the chat. Running backs to keep an eye on at the combine and in the draft. And there's maybe only going to be one or two that go in the first round, but there's going to be a bunch of them available on day two.
Running back is a position. Yeah, I really am. I'm interested to see what type of results we get out of that, what type of chatter we get out of that. The other position that I'm looking forward to hearing your report on is wide receiver.
Yeah, because that's another spot where I feel like the Bears aren't going to use their top pick on a wide receiver, but they got to bring somebody in. They have to address that at some point. And we've talked a lot about how free agency at wide receiver this year just isn't great. And there's a couple of guys you would spend money on, Juju Smith-Schuster, Jacoby Myers, but are they really the number one guy you're looking for? You might be better off. Looking for a guy in the second round, especially if you wind up with a high second round pick from a trade, or even down at 50, whatever it is, 53, 56, wherever the Bears are picking next.
Gary Ross checking in here. We draft a running back in round 4. That is the nice thing about the way the NFL draft and the way running backs are trending is you can find guys in the mid round. I mean, David Montgomery was a third round pick, right, John? Was it third or fourth?
Yeah, he was third. He was third. 73rd overall, I think.
Yeah, I mean, there are going to be a lot of mid-round guys at the running back position that have high upside. I mean, Tony Pollard, I believe, was a third
Tony
round pick.
Pollard was
Was
Tony
he even
Pollard was pretty low. He was lower than that.
was he?
I forget what he was, but
So he
I was
was
surprised how low he was looking back at it now.
okay. Yeah, so he played wide receiver at Memphis. So there were some questions about like where he fit in the NFL. But like that's what I'm saying. Like there are highly explosive athletes that if you do your evaluations correctly, and we're going under the assumption here that Ryan Poles knows how to do his job. Like there are going to be guys that Ryan Poles should be able to target in those mid rounds that have explosiveness that may take a bit of time to find an NFL role, but have such high upside that it doesn't make it worth spending higher picks on. And it's it's that's one thing with the NFL Combine that I find difficult to figure out. Is we're going to get a lot of numbers out of it, right? But what do the numbers mean? Like pundits think they mean something, but they mean different things to different NFL teams. And that's one of the more important things for you down on the combine. We talked about that, I believe, last year when we were previewing it with Hub, is it's not so much for our perspective, what numbers are going to come out of there, what bench presses, what 40 times. They tell you a little bit. But what is important for you is the time that you're going to be down there talking to people in front offices. A lot of those conversations are stuff that are front off or, off the record or just on background. But it's a lot more relaxed and you get a much better idea of how teams plan to operate. And you do still get a lot of smoke screens. Don't get me wrong. Like they're going to give you bad information, but it's also a setting where it's a little easier to weed through that information and see through what's going on, right?
Yeah, you kind of get a good temperature on where things are at with some of these teams. Whether that's it's not just the draft, but also with free agency and potentially with some of the potential extensions coming and things like that. Kyle, going back, I see a bunch of chatter from Gary about Pollard.
That's why I'm smiling.
Yeah, late fourth round pick. He was 128th overall. Most of the names ahead of him, you're okay with. I'm going to throw a couple at you, Kyle. These running backs were taken ahead of Tony Pollard. Bryce Love, Justice Hill, and Benny Snell.
One more time on those.
Three running backs taken immediately before Tony Pollard were Bryce Love to Washington, Justice Hill to Baltimore, and Benny Snell to the Steelers.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, none of those guys have worked out. That being said, I immediately started smiling when you said Justice Hill. A little personal background here. I had a couple friends that still give me crap about Justice Hill because I loved him coming out of college. And there was a year that they were asking me about like running backs to stash going into the fantasy football season. And I thought Justin Hill in his rookie season had a chance to be a breakout guy. They've never let me live that down. The fact that they're like anytime Justice Hill still touches a ball in their game, they're like, oh, look, it's Justice Hill's breakout game finally, man.
He's here.
Yeah, he's arrived. And so screw those guys, jerks. Anyway, so Gary corrected me, and he is correct. I going back there, he said Pollard was not a wide receiver. You are thinking of Antonio Gibson, same backfield. Yeah, Antonio Gibson was the wide receiver there. Pollard was the power back. So thank you, Gary, for correcting me on that. With that being said, Tony Pollard, even coming out of there, was a guy that was thought of as kind of a tweener at the NFL level. There was a reason he fell to the fourth round. Like they didn't know if he could handle an NFL workload, and there's probably a reason why Dallas has used him in the fashion that they have, right?
It was probably good for him to be behind a guy like Zeke Elliott for a couple of years. Obviously, that kind of towards the end here, these last year or two, he's clearly been the better option. But early on in his career, that was probably good for him to sort of test the waters and improve his game before he really had to be the guy there.
Sam Rush, what's up, fellas? Hey, Sam, good to see you this morning, man. We're just about to finish up here in the next 10 minutes or so, guys. Gonna be back here I'm actually out next week, heading to Vegas, not to do the gambling or any of that stuff. Going to do some hiking, get out in the sun and stuff. Although I'm sure there will be some look at some.
You're not going
Some
to do any gambling, Kyle?
well, I can't say that. I'm not. As I've gotten older, I've cared less and less about gambling. I will absolutely be stopping in at some sports books, though. Just despite the fact that you can now bet from anywhere, I still enjoy like the feeling of going to a sports book and like pulling out like the future odds and kind of looking at it and stuff. So I will definitely be looking at some NFL futures out there. I won't be betting anything, but it's just I don't know. I enjoy that setting, Sean.
My dad, likes the old school way. He will not bet on sports unless he is in Vegas.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't, like I said, I don't really sports bet anyway, but I guess I would probably be that guy if I was that way. There's something about the only time, really the only time I've bet on sports has been when in Vegas, like watching baseball or something like that. It is fun doing it out there, but I bring it up just because we're trying to figure out our schedules. Sean will be down in Indianapolis next week for the combine. So I'm thinking, Sean, that you'll get back the end of that week. So, that Monday we're coming back. So we won't be with you next Friday. But the Monday after that, we'll jump back on, recap the combine. But let's see, we got you going to watch Lake Mead water level drop. You can probably see it with your own eyes. Is so big. My wife and I are big hikers, and we're in the process of planning where we're going to do some hiking. We talked about going to the Lake Mead area. Never been down there, so that's a possibility. But wanted to wrap up today with the news about Arlington Park. And now that the Bears have secured the land, that doesn't really change a lot, right? We assumed
basically a done deal for
when
a while.
When there was no news that they had hit some kind of major roadblock, and you figured that would have leaked at some point over the past year. It had been quiet on all fronts, so it wasn't surprising to see that pop through. The question now becomes, what do you guys think the timeline is here for something like this? And Sean, let's start with you. Like, how quickly do you think this can come together?
Well, if you're the Bears and you're serious about building a new stadium, I mean, there's no reason to wait. I mean, you're trying to get this done as soon as possible. And so I would think behind the scenes, they're hard at work and coming up with some sort of stadium design right now as we speak.
Yeah, I mean, on that aspect, I don't think there's going to be a slowdown. The question becomes the money, right? And so Christopher Plasek, our colleague over at the Daily Herald, so the way it works, I guess, get a little behind the scene here, is we do a lot of sharing between our companies when it comes to Shaw Media and the Daily Herald. And so we do all of our Bears coverage and send it to them. They've been handling the front end on the Bears Arlington Park coverage. And Chris Plasek has been doing a really good job with that. You can find that at dailyherald.com. You can also find that at shawlocal.com. I would like you guys to subscribe to both, but I do know, can't expect everyone to do that. But Chris has been doing a really good job. And it's worth going over and reading that content to get a better understanding, because the money is going to be a thing here. And it's the public funding that's going to be an issue, because the Bears are trying to frame it as an issue of they're looking for public funds only for public spaces, right? For infrastructure, to build roads, to help build, sewage, all that type of stuff you need for a project of this scope. The issue is the legislation that's been introduced down in Springfield is very vague, right? It doesn't show how construction is broken down. So like if the Bears were to get these funds, there are certainly concerns about how they would be used, right? And I think you're going to see some resistance, one from people in the public, but from politicians. And I do think that could slow this process down for the next I don't know, 6 months to a year.
Yeah, I mean, the Bears have liked to point to say that, we're going to fund the stadium itself all on our own. They've been very intentional about saying that, but then at the same time, when you read their statement that they put out last week when the sale went final, they're also dangling the aspect of, well, this doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen. They're kind of putting that unknown out there, and saying, okay, without specifically saying it, they're saying, if we don't get help, this might not happen. And that's what they're saying, even though they're not saying it in so many words. They're still going to need help. This is a big facility. This is a big area, complex that they're trying to build, and they're not going to do that all on their own. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of it's going to take a little while to get all of that into place. Timeline wise, I mean, you look at like SoFi Stadium took 4 years. You're looking at, if they started today, you're looking at no earlier than 2027.
So Jailbreak popping in here with the comment, Bears shouldn't have a problem financing the stadium. There will be a lot of politics involved, and it probably doesn't help that it split counties. So yeah, kind of, again, hammering home, like the Bears have the money to build the stadium. The thing is, and the reason I'm kind of trying, I guess I'm pushing people. I want people to read this content because it's an important topic, really. I know it's fun to talk football, and it's not as much fun to talk about taxes and finances and stuff, but we are talking an incredible amount of money. And you can tell there are people with legit concerns because these school districts, and you talk about it's straddling these two counties, Jailbreak. Uh, these school districts, now that they've had a look at some of these potential property tax breaks or freezes, and these different mechanisms the Bears have included in this legislation. I guess the Bears haven't included in the legislation. They can't act on it, but it's been introduced. Obviously, the Bears have had input on the way this legislation was drafted. But you've seen now local school districts have a negative reaction to it, and they've started to hire lobbyists to combat the legislation that is down in Springfield right now. That's a concern. Like when local school districts are now spending money to try and say, hey, that's our tax dollars. We need that money, it's something that I think people or the Bears are going to try and gloss over. It's going to get lost in the conversation over the idea of a gorgeous new stadium and the idea of having a Super Bowl. And listen, it's less than 30 minutes from my house. I absolutely love the idea, but there are legit things that need to be figured out, and I hope there's a good discussion that comes out of it, and it's not something that it's going to end up being a chain around taxpayers, 10 or 15 years down the road.
Well, yeah, you would hope that there's going to be that those opinions are going to be taken into account, and there's going to be deals made along the way to get something that's good for everyone, and hopefully that means more community meetings like we saw last fall, right before the season, more things like that, more opportunities to get more opinions. But yeah, this is obviously it's going to affect the whole region, and it's going to affect every taxpayer, in those counties, potentially in the state, whatever it winds up being. So yeah, there's going to have to be a lot of discussion to make this thing work. And so, I don't think 2026 is really possible anymore with this timeline. That would be awfully quick to build a stadium. And yeah, Kyle, you're right. I mean, these conversations could put a snag in this for a couple of months here as we try to figure out what exactly this is going to look like for everybody involved.
I mean, I think a couple months at a minimum. I mean, this is something that it could drag on, just because they closed on the land. We shouldn't be making an assumption that they're going to be building on it anytime soon. I think it's more likely than not that they are building on it relatively soon. Or at least starting to do the prep work, right? Like, I don't know how quickly they can legit, like, they're going to have to clear the site. I just drove by it a couple days ago. There's obviously still a giant horse track there. There are an incredible amount of stables. There's a lot of infrastructure that they're going to have to figure out or how to clear. I don't know if they're going to incorporate any existing structures into that area. It's not. I got distracted by Mr. Shorty popping in here with a doobie. Something I saw someone and Kyle, Kyle, and I are smoking a doobie if the Bears make the playoffs. I saw the people in here as we were talking about playoff talk. I'm not even sure how they got into playoff talk here, but we'll get into that later down the road, guys. I'm glad to see that there's some optimism going into the Bears, Sean. Though.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys are feeling good here in late February, so that's positive.
Yeah. All right. You know what? Let's go ahead and wrap this up, Sean. We got plenty of time this offseason to talk. We're about an hour long here. It's been great having you guys with us this morning. You know, it's I really do love the fact that it's the offseason and we have this many people on joining us in the morning. One more time.
It's great.
Please give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell. Let find out when we're going to be there. Let your friends know. If they're a Bear fan, they're looking for a podcast to listen to. Shaw Local Bears Insider Podcast. You can go to shawlocal.com to find all of our content, everything that we write down. Sean will be heading down to Indianapolis next week, and I'll be down in Vegas. Trying not to think about the combine, honestly, but I'll catch up when I get back. We'll be back with you guys. Sean, you got anything else, man?
No. Thanks everyone for joining the show and for all your comments and questions. It makes it fun.
All right, everyone, have a good week. We'll talk with you soon.